Welcome to The Human Edge. This week's guest is Pete Maiden. This was a fantastic conversation. Pete's story takes us from the age of 16 to joining the Navy to present day when in 2011 he founded and has been the CEO since of a charity called CHEXS, CHEXS, which provides support in the local community for children and families who are really in need of support. I found this to be a super inspiring and motivating conversation. I really loved it. I hope you do too. And if you do, please share, please like, please subscribe, all of that stuff. It will be massively helpful. Thank you. Pete, thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
I really appreciate it. And actually, when you and I first spoke and agreed to do this, it was it was last year at some stage.
It was, long time ago.
Summer 24, I think, and there's been some rescheduling on both sides, so it's great that we're finally sitting here together. And you've come fully branded.
Yes, I have. So I've just come from a business network group, BNI, and we're the chosen charity there, and you get lots of visitors coming through, so it's just really good to just make sure that people can see the charity that we stand for and who we're all about, really.
And for those that can't see on their screen or are listening and can't see at all, the charity is CHEXS. What does that stand for, and what do you do?
Right. Well, CHEXS is probably not the greatest of names. People often say, why have you called it CHEXS? But it's about our values, and it's about community, homes, enrichment, extra mile and support, and they're fundamentally the things that we do. So those acronyms were forged into one, and CHEXS is the word. Yeah. Whether we should have done that back in 2000 and whenever, probably maybe. But we've got a really strong brand now, and people know what we do and how we do it. And in essence, the charity, it supports families. It gives people an opportunity to listen, to offload stuff, and families can be given support. And then we have a growth program where children can get put onto a program for 30 weeks to find their meaning. It's around giving them the opportunities to build resilience, aspirations, and expectations with tangible things. So we have like contracts with Lee Valley Park Authority. They'll go into the woods, they'll crop us some trees, or they'll go into primary school and make willow sculptures where they're mentoring younger children. And it's a consistency. It's every other week, every third week, and that's what we do. It's not rocket science. Just builds a relationship.
And are the children and the families that come to you from a disadvantaged background? What's the kind of the need that you're filling?
Disadvantaged.
It's a loaded word.
It is. And who is disadvantaged and who is vulnerable? I think anybody that needs help. Schools are our predominant people that refer the children onto the programme for the opportunities. It's given them a place to find their calling. I think over the last 15 years or so, even probably longer than that, schools have been very pressured into academia, which they have to, and academia is really, really important. But if you look at a class of 30 children, and they're doing maths and English, and people can accelerate, and they, age related, and they're really learning. But there might be some cohorts that can't grasp the maths or the English, and then they're starting to doubt themselves. What am I? It's the third week. It's the second week. I don't get what they're getting, and what we do with CHEXS, we give people an opportunity to learn other things outside of academia that are just as important about the life skills that they do, and it's tangible. So as a group are moving forward as a collective, everybody can see that we've all got strengths, and those dynamics then create the team, and that's in essence what we do.
Yeah, and you're touching on one of my kind of pet subjects at the moment, the school system. So I've got two kids who are 10 and 12 at the moment. My eldest is soon to be a teenager, so officially. And it's clear to me that, yes, of course, there needs to be some basis of academia, but there's in this country, this is my opinion, there's way too much emphasis on it at the moment to the exclusion of kids of all shapes and sizes. I don't think we're teaching kids these days life skills, whether it's using their hands or emotional intelligence or learning about money. None of this is taught in schools. So the focus is on academics, on results, on exams, and I don't think it's helping, the kind of our younger generations. Is that having kind of worked in this sector for almost CHEXS was 2011? Is that right?
2011. Yeah. Before that, I was around teaching. I was just saying I was in London, Islington Green in 2003.
Yeah.
Before that, I was in the Navy. I think there's a balance, and I think very often we have a tendency, and I'm going to work to nautical terms. You know, you've got midships, and you've got port and starboard, and I think people come into power and they try to change the world, and they go too much to the left and it leans to the port, and you're tipping that way, and then someone comes in and it tips it right, and then you go the other way, and you just need a little bit more consistency and a little bit of steering instead of being so dramatic either side. We need it all, and that's the key, and schools have been doing an incredible job, and I think sometimes schools get a raw deal about what they do and how they do it, because at the end of the day, Ofsted are going to come knocking on their door. A head teacher's got a couple of bites at the cherry to prove that they're not requires improvement or even special measures, and go, need to be good and now aspiring to outstanding. And if they don't pull that off, at some point it's going to be all bets are off, adios amigo, and someone else coming in. And I think since 2011, I think there's been so much about academia. And you do need maths, you do need English, you need those scientists, you need those professions where you need the academia to go on to X, Y, and Z. But there's also more about vocation, and it's about hands, and it's about people with skills and strengths, that we're all part of it. And if we all have the society all henpegged into one side of it, we don't have a balance. And I think what schools have unfortunately had to do is they've had to go one way. Example of that is baccalaureate. So baccalaureate got introduced, amazing thing. You've got your maths, your English, your science, your languages, and your humanity, and that sort of stuff. But schools then had to really focus on that to show we're amazing at this. But then that maybe the arts have suffered. DT suffered, sport, because they're putting loads of resources into that, because that's what they're gauged on about whether they're being successful. But schools are very, very proactive, they're very local, and they react, and they are very astute about what they need to do and how they need to do it, because they know their children. Look at a primary school, they come in at nursery, leave at year 6, that's a long period of time. And there's not one school I've ever been in that haven't really done what they thought was best for the child. Unfortunately, at times, there's regulations, there's set parameters, there's the SATs and everything else, and sometimes you've got to do what you've got to do to show your worth and how you develop that child.
I agree. I mean, the schools are doing their best. They're working in a system. It's the system they have a problem with, not necessarily the schools themselves. I'm just remembering back to one of our reschedules, because you were invited to go and, I think it was talk at a Labour conference or anything.
Yeah,
like that.
it was. So there was a guy called Dr. Roger Green, who's a top guy from Goldsmiths, and he said, you need to go to the Labour conference to just come into power, listen through and listen to the debates and be part of it. And it was really inspiring to see what was being discussed and about what needed to change and how things needed to change.
Was it? I only asked that now in the conversation because I was wondering whether it was in relation to what you've seen in education and kind of around the edges with CHEXS, or was it from a different perspective?
No, we try to share. There's a good event with Bridget at the Cavern, and we talked about personal development and about how peer on peer is so vitally important, and that when they're looking at the new assessments and how they're going to change academia for what they believe in the next years to come, is that they had to focus on personal development, peer on peer, and she was very receptive to that. The assessment only just come out, the draft proposal from Becky, so it's too short to say whether things are going to change for the good, but I just think what we need to do now is just get back to midships and make sure we cater for everybody instead of just being specifically narrow-minded on academia.
So CHEXS is 14 years old, something like that, 14, 15 years old.
Yeah, it is.
What does the next, if you can possibly say, the next 14, 15 years hold? And maybe that's too long a time scale, but what's the vision for the future? That's really the question.
That's a really good question. I didn't set out to form a charity. It's just happened, really. And when I see the difference it's having, it gives you that meaning. You've got passion and purpose, and I think you've got those two P's. You can do anything, but the momentum's there now. We just did an event last week called Seeing is Believing, where we invited really high-profile people like Director of Public Health, high up in Children's Commission, housing associations, to come and see what we do, because sometimes people have an unconsciousness or they assume they know what we do, and until you've actually listened to it and you've come to experience it, you probably aren't too haven't got really the finger on the pulse to it. And last week was really a eureka moment because people could understand. So right at the beginning, the chair, who's an amazing guy, Tony, he's an ex-primary head teacher. The board are really strong and got different varieties of skills and parts of the community. And they spoke. And then we've been doing this for a while. And there's a guy called Muzz who he was on one of our residentials back in 2014. He's built quite substantially. He's very physically strong and a real alpha. And he went on residentials with us. He's now an entrepreneur. He's now in the officers block that we're based in, selling perfume and aftershave, and he's doing really, really well. And he spoke about him working with the charity and what it did for him. And I don't want to speak for him because he said it during this event, but in essence, it was like you could see two different roads here.
Yeah.
And he decided to go on a different path, and look where he is now. He's an entrepreneur. He's making a fortune, because he must be to be staying in the place that he's in. And he spoke really articulately about what we do and how we do it. And that's just like, wow. You know, that was 10, 11 years ago. And it's like, how many young people have been part of the charity to give them that opportunity to find themselves to what they're doing now? And then there was another gentleman, Danny. He spoke about we're working with his lad, Dion, right from primary through to secondary, and where Dion is now in his own self-esteem and experience. And that was a dad's reflection on what the charity have done for his son. And to stand up in front of people and talk quite openly about your own, you know, what's happening in your family. It's quite personal, vulnerable. And it was amazing because everyone could then see this isn't a flash in the pan. We're not jumping on the bandwagon now saying, oh, we're going to do this now because this is a new government agenda item or whatever. We've been doing this for a long, long time. And because it works. And then we all got in a bus and then we drove off into the woods and they could see primary working with secondary, being mentored with each other. We then got back in the bus and then we went to Tesco's where the family support team were doing an Ascend workshop for parents around EHCPs. And it felt all the parents knew it was happening, so it had been cleared. But there's this community room in Tesco's and they're having some real personal conversations. And we all piled in and it just didn't feel right. And we were meant to be there for half an hour, and my anxiety was reaching out, going tenfold. And, you know, but the people that were part of it could see what was happening in that room and the personal, emotional conversations that they were becoming a peer-on-peer support network, and it was being supported by the team. They got that. And we left quite quickly. But it achieved what it needed to, is that people could see what we were doing, why we were doing it, how we were doing it, and how they could probably get involved. So back onto the question, in 14 years' time, more of it. Yeah, you know, it's very labour intensive what we do. And you've got to develop it. It's not cheap, it's not volunteering. It's, you know, you've got to have paid members of staff who are dedicated and keen, and it's about how we can make sure it's sustainable and we can reach more. Currently our charity is working with 15% of the children that we could possibly work with. 15? 15, 1-5. Okay. So it could be a lot more.
It could be. Okay. What are the biggest obstacles? Well, let me ask it this way: for the charity itself, not necessarily for you as CEO, what are the biggest obstacles to growing that pie so that 15 becomes 50? Let's say.
Culture, I would say, internal culture. You've got to do what you do with CHEXS because you want to do it, and it's not an easy job. And it's not rocket. You know, you're not paying pop star salaries. But it's you've got to want to do it. You can't hide, and it's about having that going the extra mile and wanting to do stuff because you know it's the right thing to do, and consistency. Going out into the forest twice a week with groups of lads and lasses. It might sound it's a bit fluffy, but when it's raining and it's cold and you're trying to engage and motivate lads for 6-7 hours. And you're doing it the next day, and then you're doing it the following week, and then you're doing it the following week, and you know there's no light at the end of the tunnel. It's like, unless you genuinely enjoy it, it's like a sentence, because you know where to hide. You're not in a room like this with air conditioning, nice and warm and cosy. You're out, and the family support team are meeting people on the school gate. They're going to where families meet and congregate and just be part of the fabric of community. So the energy and the enthusiasm and the willing to wanting to do that, it's massive. So the culture of the charity has to maintain the uniqueness of why we are here and making sure that people come on board that have the same mindset and the same enthusiasm for it. I think as long as we can maintain that, it evolves. And what we were doing today doesn't mean we do tomorrow. It doesn't really matter. Everything that we do is about a journey, and it's all this cliche at the moment, journey this and journey that, but it's true. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it's about meaning and purpose, it's about building resilience, it's about aspirations and expectations. And if we can follow that, whether we're cropping a tree, making a willow sculpture, doing a mural, making a raised bed, or doing whatever, it doesn't really matter. As long as people can see where they're progressing and they're developing. And the importance of it, it's a whole approach. So, and what I mean by that in two areas. One is that I'm not saying to you, put your school blazer on, stop chewing gum, and you have to adhere to the school rules, which you have to in schools, and it has to be followed. We're saying wear your glasses and put your safety gloves on, otherwise you're going to get hawthorn, you might lose an eye. And also I need to do the same, so if I am not wearing it, you tell me.
Yeah.
And from that perspective, all we can do is we can keep reinforcing it through. And then when the family support side of it, a lot of our team have got lived experiences. We're not condescending, patronising, derogative. It's like, yeah, I've been there, I've had similar situations, so people can feel like you're vulnerable, and vulnerability is the key. And I think human nature, we want to be invincible, and look at us, look at all the rest of it. It's like sometimes we just got to show we are pretty vulnerable, and by showing our vulnerabilities, we're actually really strong by doing that. And it's about reinforcing that it's okay to not be okay, but just saying it means nothing, it's actually showing it.
Yeah. I love that message, and it's something I talk about quite a lot in these conversations and kind of outside of the podcast. And for young men especially, many of whom are taught that vulnerability is a sign of weakness. You know, you're soft if you show your emotions. That message, especially today, given the mental health crisis that is apparent for young men especially, that message has never been more important.
Oh, completely. And when you look at mental health and you look at, counselling, which is really, really important, and if you say you had 100 children that needed counselling, if you actually analyse it, and they had opportunities, not interventions, opportunities to talk, experience other things, they probably wouldn't need 100 children that needed the counselling. Yeah. You'd only maybe need 10. Counselling is, you have to have it, entrenched trauma, to go through and unpick things and reflect. But lots of the other children could probably have been better equipped by having earlier opportunities to do other things to find their meaning and purpose. And what we do in the charity, we give those children the opportunities to make friendship groups, to work bloody hard at something, to fail at something, to see that an adult's sweating as well, and there's like, I want a cup of tea in 10 minutes because I'm knackered as well. Oh, you're human. Oh yes, I want a cup of tea. And you sit down, you have a cup of tea, it's like, right, let's crack on and let's finish this job. Yeah. And all of that creates, it's not rocket science, but it's that intensity and that consistency to be doing that. And schools have been amazing for the CHEXS because they are saying to parents, this is a great thing for your child to be put on, but they could be missing 5 weeks of core curricular time in an academic year. That's a lot of time to miss. So it's got to be a balance, and that's where we've worked really well with the schools to say, this is what we do. We're a small strategy in your big strategy because they do amazing work, and we can complement and support. And by doing what we do, those children, not everyone, but a lot of the children and young people, get that confidence, see the difference that they are, believe in themselves, to then have an understanding about why they might need to spend more time at maths, why they might need to spend more time doing English, because it's part of the big picture, but also my inner confidence and my teamwork, my problem solving. I'm severely dyslexic myself. Okay, I can't spell my name because my name's Peter, I write Dieter, and people used to ridicule me, and I've still got phobias of that. If you asked me to read the passage out of the Bible now, randomly, I would go into meltdown. But I'm all right with my mouth, and I've got different strengths, and it's like everybody else is the same, and that's what we do.
And I want to come back to dyslexia, and because it's definitely worth spending some time exploring. I just want to pick up one. Well, I had one question actually, or observation from an answer you gave earlier when I asked about the vision for the future and the challenges to the charity of achieving that vision. You said culture, which is really interesting. I was expecting you to say money, fundraising, but you didn't say that, and I'm curious why.
Fundraising, money, sustainability, business plan, risk register, all of the things that you need to operate as a business, it's massively important. And the charity,
but not the biggest challenge.
Because if we haven't got the soul of what the charity stands for, we're not worth being around, and it should go. Because it's only here because we can help, and it's not like my ego or my legacy. It's nothing to do with that. It's like there's fundamentally something that does help, and it needs to be more. And you know, Ben, my treasurer, would say this shouldn't be a charity. This should be state should be doing this, and we should do ourselves out of a job. And I agree in that. So sustainability, but it's the culture of the staff and the volunteers that make it work. It isn't me. It's like I set it up and I create frameworks and I'm passionate about it. But I'm not in the forest now. I'm here talking to you.
Yes.
The team are in the forest now with a group of children. The family support team are doing one-to-ones, meeting at the school gate. It's just a living entity. And the Seeing is Believing event last week made people realise it isn't a one person. It's the culture of CHEXS. That's from the boss of the chair right through to everyone. And that's the key, and as long as we don't detract from why we do what we do, it'll maintain, because we will find a way to fundraise, we'll find a way to income generate to what we need to do. I'm hopeful of that. But to be sustainable, we need to make sure we stay focused on why we're doing what we do.
Yeah, I love that answer. Culture's driving everything. Get the culture right and everything else will follow.
Completely.
Yeah.
And it's been a big learning curve, you know. There's been times where things have been going down the routes and all the rest of it. Bridget, at the conference at the Cavern, said something that really resonated with me. And we talk about Sure Start and children's centres, and she said she was from Sunderland. She was from a single parent household, and there was a real need for dads clubs, and there was a real appetite for them to be on a Saturday, but they never happened because the people that were running the centres didn't want to work on a Saturday. And she said, that can't happen. And I sat there and I thought, wow, there's a politician saying what I've believed in forever and a day. And, you know, we go into the forest, we do all of these things because it's what we need to do to be able to create that environment for people to learn in. And it's not what we want, it's how it's best. And hearing that really resonated with me. And that's the culture. It's about you have to do what you have to do to be able to support, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. It makes perfect sense. I'm just thinking about where to go next. So I'm gonna leave your naval career for a little while, but maybe the answer to this next question will touch on that as well. It sounds like you said you didn't set out to form a charity, but something must have happened in and around 2011 to have you create this thing. So what was happening in your life at that time?
I was in the Navy. I was a PT. I got medical discharged, and then started teaching. And there was a charity called Skillforce, and I went to join Skillforce, and it was predominantly in Islington Green, just down the road from here. And within the small space of a time, within about a year, Irene, who's the deputy head there, basically, I became the tutor for a group of lads for 10s and 11s. There was about 20, 22. There's some girls in there as well. And they did maths and English. They did Hackney Community College and me for the rest of it. And we did vocation qualifications. And they got like national qualification framework points. At the end of the 2 years with us, they would have got like nearly 200 points, which is the equivalent to 5 GCSEs until Mr. Gove changed it all. And I really enjoyed it. It was fantastic. And we then got a pot of money from the Prince's Trust. I worked with Islington Council. They got the park behind the Angel Tube Station. We got a little caboose with a microwave and a kettle and a radio. And eventually convinced the lads it wasn't payback. And we did some gardening and painted the electrical boxes. And it was just amazing. And I left that because it was hard and it was great, but 6 years at it. And then the government introduced a thing called extended schools, which was about opening up the infrastructure for education. So instead of it just being a 9 to 3, there was adult learning, family learning, childcare, there was before and after school, lots of things. And there's a role for that. And I got the job. And then Turnford School was the lead of it. And then the head teacher asked me to start teaching again. So I took a cohort, a group that I was doing what I was doing in London, and she promoted me to assistant, and I was managing the community and the pool and all that and extended schools, and I was doing the teaching. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. This is like really great opportunities, and I'd love to set up a charity. And my boss said, okay, do it. So I set up CHEXS, and I then left the thing, and the rest is sort of history, really. There was a thing called local school partnerships, which was doing family support, which was like about 20% of what we do. We delivered that, and the rest of it, we evolved the programme from all of the years of what I've been doing. Because when I was in London, it was quite clear after you got a relationship with the lads and they could trust you, and you've gone through all of the Ultimate Warriors and all that malarkey, you were making real headway with them. And then people in the home were saying, how the hell is you getting them to do this and this? And you're realising that what you're doing, you could bring it into the family, and you can't do one without the other. And so when I set the charity, it was basically, it can't be just children, it's got to be parent, and you've got to work it together. And that's what we do, and that's what we still do to this day. We have a children and young people team, a family support team, work collectively together for the good of the whole family. And that's what happened, and the rest is history, is what they would say. A landmark thing is in 2018, we failed an interview for Henry Smith for quite a lot of money, and rightly so. The interview was like last part of the process, and the feedback was incredible. Our governance, we had really strong governance in relation to empowerment, but the roles and responsibilities, whenever they asked a question, they were looking back at me for support. Is that right, Pete? And, and it was just showing that everything maybe was coming via me, which was the problem. And it was a great critical friend, and we just went through every stage of the feedback, and we implemented all of the changes, went on loads of training, got loads of advice, and we then went back to Henry Smith 2 years later, and we got it. And the momentum there then, it's just self-building, isn't it? Because you learn more, you get other people from the board come in, and there's just so many people wanting to help it and build it, and that's where we're at now.
I was just reflecting as you were talking. You joined the Navy at 16, and how many years later you're the CEO of this charity, and life, the randomness of life, right? how all roads have kind of led you, not through design or anything. It's just kind of choices you've made and decisions you've made, and this is where you are right now. It's a really interesting narrative.
I guess it is, if you look at it that way. It's just I think that's life, isn't it? I think I keep saying it, if you're passionate and you've got purpose, you can achieve most of the things. If it's genuine and you want to make a difference. It sounds like a pot thing, but it's so true. It's true.
Is that what the Navy was for you at 15, 16 years old?
I think so. I was a cheeky chap at school, you can probably tell from my mouth. Parents were great.
But school was not a place for dyslexics.
Oh no, but to credit to my school, Mr. Shaw was my history teacher, and he was also my tutor. And he couldn't understand why I was in the bottom sets for everything, but I was quite articulate at history. And Mr. Whittle was my geography teacher, top teachers. And obviously they had a little chat and said, what's going on here? And so I went on some tests and psychiatrists and all that, and I was diagnosed with dyslexia at 14, which was great because then anyone could understand why I was always writing Dieter instead of Peter. But it was late down the road for me to get into, to get them opportunities to practice and do stuff.
And I'm imagining also late down the road in terms of your the way you saw yourself. You said to me a few minutes ago that even now, where dyslexia is concerned, that there are still kind of issues about your own. These are my words, like self-worth or self-esteem around dyslexia. I imagine then as a 14-year-old. With all of that kind of undiagnosed stuff going on prior to that, it was doubly hard.
Oh, totally. You don't want to be put in a spot, and it's like any animal. If you force them into a corner, and there's no way out, you're going to fight, and you've got your strategies to get out of stuff because you don't want to embarrass yourself for sure. And I think that's what drives through sometimes. I'm all right being dyslexic. I'm happy about it.
Yeah.
And I was saying it in the thing last week. I've got some friends who are really clever people. My wife's an academic, masters in this and little she's brilliant.
Yeah.
I've got a friend who's a clinical director at A&E Consult. I've got 2 friends who are doctors in GSK and university. I've got another GP, and these are friends who are godparents to my kids.
Yeah.
And when I'm like tongue in cheek, I'm thick as two, and my wife gets quite frustrated. She's like, stop putting yourself down all of the time. It really winds me up, and it's like I'm not putting myself down. I know if you were to gauge me, I'm pretty whatever at spelling. I know that, but I'm not saying I'm thick. I'm just saying I'm not. How you gauge academia and intelligence?
Yeah.
I'm not in that parameter.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean I'm not competent and got an intelligence. It's just a different type of intelligence.
It is a different, yeah.
And it's like. Yeah. We've got so focused on degrees and academia, and if you've passed this test, you're then able to do this. But, I'm not here to preach, but I've heard through the grapevine in Bristol there's a professor in Banksy. Yeah? So there's a professor in Banksy, whether it's true or not, it's a myth's tale. Now, who's more talented, the professor or Banksy? Mm. So, you've got someone who's doing an academia study on someone that's talented to draw. Yeah. Both of them are talented, yes. But I don't know whether Banksy's got a degree in art. He might not be. Yeah. And it's like, you can't enforce people's creativity and specialness. Yeah. I'm dyslexic, my brain's wired in a certain way. I wouldn't change it for the world. Yeah. It's like saying, I'm really great at maths and learning, so I'm going to do the theory side of football. So that's going to now make me a professional football player. Yeah. You may know the theory of it, but it doesn't mean you can play it. Yeah. And I think we're too focused on the theory side instead of the practical side.
Yeah. You said you wouldn't change it for the world. Has it always been that way for you? No.
I wish I was able to. I'm a bit of a gob, and when we were doing English, they would want to start to do plays, and the English teacher would give out the books, and they'd say, right, these are going to be the plays. You're going to be those characters. Oh, by the way, Pete, you go next door to see Mrs. Schofield, and you can practice your spellings. So I'd get up, go next door, trying to spell while everyone else is doing plays and all that sort of stuff, and. I would love to have done that sort of stuff, and I'd love to have been able to just get on in school from that side of it. Mm-hmm. I put a post on the other day. I was looking through my personal development from the Navy, and I was 29 when I passed my grade C GCSE. That was the biggest achievement of my life. Yeah. It's like people, God, Pete, that's pathetic. But it's not pathetic for me. That's a wow. It took me 7 attempts to get that C. And for me, a C was like, and it's like celebrating the small achievements that someone else could think that's a lot of rubbish, but it's actually not. Because you don't know anyone else's story. Yeah. And it's too easy to jump on conclusions and be, unconscious or conscious biases about things. And
Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah, I'm 51 now, so it was kind of a while ago. It was kind of a while ago.
It feels very present right now.
Oh, 100%. 100%, totally. Yeah. It's, I needed that, I needed maths, other bits and bobs to get on in my career, and it was like a baseline, you had to have it, so I had to have. Yeah. But it was, if I had have failed it, D's not a fail, eh? If I'd have got another D, I was not going to do it again now. Well, maybe I would have, who knows, but my mindset behind it, I'm not doing this again, I'm just exhausted with it, demoralising me every time.
I bet it was.
It was the points lost in spelling. Yeah. But obviously didn't lose that many points in the last time. In the end. Don't write big words. Yeah. And don't make sure they got buts, P's, D's, H's and Y's and I's and E's in it. Avoid them like the plague. Yeah. But
So tell me about your experiences in the Navy. I think I read, or you told me, that you were the youngest serving sailor in the Gulf War. Is that right? You tell me what the statistic is.
Yeah. So I joined the Navy in 1989 in October. I was 16 in the September. And Mr. Trainer, PE teacher, Mr. Trainer, top guy, he let me go off and do the stuff that I needed to do to get into the Navy. My parents didn't even know about it. So the exams, the interviews, the medicals.
So you applied for the Navy without telling your parents that you were doing it?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. Why did you do that?
I don't know. There was no sinisterness in there. It's just did it, I guess. Yeah. And then I told my mum and dad, and my dad had come back from nights, he worked shifts, and I said, I want to join the Navy. He's like, all right, and, you've got to do this, and I've done all of that, Dad, you just got to come up and sign some paperwork. And that was in the June, July, and then I joined in the October. And, just skin of my teeth. I don't know how I passed the maths and English. I've said this before, but the Navy have got a grading system. So 0 is a GCSE grade C for maths and English. And then it goes from 1 to 9. And 9 is the worst grade. It's called NAMIT. My NAMIT was 9. So, and I'm pretty confident that I probably didn't get what I needed to get, but maybe, I don't know this, and I'm not throwing anyone under the bus here.
Well, maybe they saw something.
But I think the chief and the recruitment officer saw this 15-year-old had to get 2 buses to get here. And anyway, so I got in, and then basic training was a nightmare. You know, you look at my reports, nervous, it will be unachieving, will never be a high flyer, struggling, and all of those side of things. And it's like, yeah, you're probably right. I'm 16 here, guys. I'm out of my comfort zone massively. I'm having to rapidly learn information and then process it and do an exam on it. And I remember really struggling. And then we were doing the assault course for the first time and was on the leopard call, and our number 1 instructor shouted over to me and went, you know, swore a little couple of bleacheries and went, thank God for that, we found something you're good at. The assault course and all the rest of it. And then went into radar. I struggled with radar, all the maths side of it, and it's like, again, in the documents, really struggled. But when you've learnt your theory, you then go into the practical simulators and you're doing the talking on the, you know, and all the rest of it. And I did pretty good at that funny old thing. And then I joined the ship, the Brazen, and I joined the Brazen in the summer. I was 17 in the August, and we sailed for the Gulf in September. So I was the youngest serving military person in the Gulf War, especially from the Naval Task Force. Whether it was the Army and the RAF or not, I'm not sure, but it'd have been quite difficult to get any younger than what I was, because I was 17, and then we sailed back in 1990.
I really struggled to put myself in the shoes of a teenager effectively going to war. Maybe it wasn't quite as dramatic as that for you, but what was the I know the thought process as you were sailing off to the
ignorance?
Yeah,
ignorance is bliss, I guess.
Yeah.
Lots of very strong men, physically and mentally. I was a baby. You know, I was a junior seaman, you know, the lowest of the low. So I was like the pond life, not the pond life, it's the wrong word to say, but, you know, I had no bearing in anything. And having all of those people around you, you feel quite strong and secure. Yeah. But I think the ignorance side of it is probably my saving grace. Especially when we sailed, we were at sea for 54 days, and, you know, there's quite a high mine threat because of what was in the waters. Saddam had done, and, you know, if you Google USS Tripoli, you'll see a nice big hole in the side of it. Where if you're married with 2 children, or you're married, or you're older, you just understand more, you're not as ignorant as a 17-year-old is, the possibilities are, you could hit a mine any time, or something could happen, and when you're missing your wife and your 2 children, it's going to play havoc on your mental health. And doing 8 hours on and 8 hours off consistently for 50-odd days, it's quite harrowing. Yes. And then you go to action stations, and you're on the upper deck, and, you know, Chief G.I. Boyle's telling me to give me an SLR instead of being down to reload CNAT, which is the anti-missile systems, and you've spent months practicing to reload within 60 seconds, and the next minute someone's giving you a gun and saying, when I tell you to shoot, and you're like saying, but Chief, I won't be able to reload the CNAT in 60 seconds without holding this gun. And it's like, you know, a couple of strong words, basically. And all of that. Quite a lot of people suffered from stress and were taken off the ship.
I'm not surprised.
And I look back, and the biggest remorse I have is that if that was me now, I would be one of those people getting taken off the ship with 2 kids and a wife and all of that crap going on. There's no way I could do it. And how people do it now and all the rest of it, it's not until you get to that stage and you can reflect about what they were going through and not really understanding that everybody has their own stresses and pressures. Yeah. And at 17, I was probably immune to it all.
Yeah. But you served again in Serbia.
Yeah, but that was, you know,
must have been a different experience.
On the battle axe, it's just boarding boarding party. You know, go just off the coast of Split and just board ships. Royal Marines did most of it. We were trained, but, you know, and that was just that, really. It wasn't the same. on land, what was going on land, you know, was horrendous. But from the Navy side of it, all we were doing was boarding, making sure that nothing was going into split. That shouldn't have been. But whether that was actually beneficial and was actually purposeful. Have you ever tried to search a big ship? with 2 insertions of about 10 blokes. Yeah. It's not a lot of people to search a ship. That's massive. Yeah. You know, if you wanted to hide stuff,
it's easily done.
Could you hide stuff? But that, from that side of it.
Yeah, thinking about, I'm now kind of drawing a line, maybe a thin line between your naval experiences when you were still pretty young and what you need to do to be a leader, the CEO of an organisation. I'm imagining that there were some learnings in your time from the Navy in terms of values or behaviours or whatever that you were able to take from those days and use today.
Oh, 100%. I think the Navy is amazing. And you see the advert, you know, born in Wigan, made by the Royal Navy. It's a great strapline because it's true. It's I think the generally
not born in Wigan, but
you know, it's like they focus on what you can do instead of what you can't.
Yeah.
And you can't get anywhere without working as a team. It's a cliche now, a team with this and team with that. But genuinely, if a missile's just hit the side of the ship and it's a bloody disaster zone, no one person is going to fix it. Yeah. And not one person is going to defend you. And it's like you've got to rely on each other. And it's true. And that whole essence of I'm not good at that, but I'm good at that, and then specialising into what you do and how you do it, it's really, really important. And that's what the Navy sort of really work on. And then you just learn, and you have such inspirational leaders, people that you know, right from the captains of the world, but it's also down in the decks. You know, the hardest job in the Navy, I believe, is to be a leading hand of a mess deck of 54 blokes. You know, you've got 16-year-olds to 50-year-olds. You've got all demographics of society. You've got to live with them, but also be the, you know, if anything kicks off down there, it's you're the one that's going to be to blame. So that's such the hardest job in the world, being a leading hand of a mess deck. And if you've got the interpersonal skills to be one of the lads and doing everything, but also be the authority to stop things from escalating, that in itself is probably one of the hardest jobs ever.
And that's something you need to do, right, for CHEXS. You need to be one of the lads in terms of getting stuck in with the kids that you work with, but you're also the CEO. So I can see a parallel with that. Yeah,
but it'll break you. And we just recruited a chief operating officer that starts in April. Liz, she's an ex-Senko. She's an assistant head. She was an assistant head of a school that had our services, so she's seen the charity from the other side. Yeah. And also is far more qualified in special educational needs, qualified Senko, way better than me. And be able to manage the operational delivery of the team, because the last couple of years it's been really difficult to manage the team, look at risk registers, insurances and business plans and networking and sustainability, as well as the cold face is the bread and butter of the charity, and trying to do it all. It's been, you know, I've not been great at all of it, if that makes sense. And it's unless we get those proper structures and processes in place, it will fail at some point. And the board have seen that, and we've recruited, and it's a massive investment. We can't afford it. Spending writing checks that I've, you know, and all the rest of it. But unless we get that structure in place, it'll be difficult. Yeah, yeah. How have you managed to keep your head above water in that period of time then, when you've been doing it all? Have you managed to keep well, if you speak to other people, they probably say I haven't, to be fair, especially my wife. It's just, you're doing it because you want to do it, eh? Yeah. It's not a job. It is a job. But when you believe in something, you know, it's a difference.
It's a vocation, it's a passion, whatever.
It is, and it sounds cliche, and it's very easy to sound like unsincere. But like last week, listening to like Muzz talk about what he was doing and stuff and where he's now, it's like, that's why I'm doing it. Yeah. I don't want to. I want this environment, this entity of what the charity does. It works, and it's like I want it to be able to help more people. It's thousands of kids and we've worked with over the years. Yeah. You know, and that's what you do, and that's why you do it, and you learn. I think my biggest strength is know what I'm crap at. Pardon me, French. I know what I'm not very good at,
swearing is okay,
and I'm happy to ask for help. And there are a lot of people out there that are happy to help.
Yeah.
But
that goes back to the conversation we had earlier about vulnerability, right? So part of that is saying I need help, and I think many of us are. I don't know whether it's in this country or whether I don't know what it is. We find, and men especially, find it difficult to say I need help.
Oh, completely.
So again, you're kind of modelling that for the kids that you're working with, maybe indirectly.
It is, and I became a physical training instructor, which is quite an elite branch. There's 200 and something out of 37,000 people. It's very difficult to become one. It was an amazing thing. People say I was a bogus, because I wasn't an elite athlete. I was okay, but I was great at motivating. Well, I say I was great. Who am I to say that? But I was good at being there. I did it because I wanted to be there for other people. I wasn't there for my own agenda.
Yeah.
I wasn't a great footballer. I wasn't an athlete going to the Olympics, the Commonwealth Games. I was doing there. And a PT, you may not believe it, it may be different now in the Navy. It's a long time ago since I was there. But my last ship was an oceanographic survey ship, and there was 120 men and women on that ship. And they would spend months and months and months at sea, boring. And there'd be 12 oceanographic surveyors on board. The rest of everyone was just to get them there to do what they needed to do. So you imagine if you're a chef or whatever, you work just like we work in a town. What do you do when you finish work? What are you going to do? It's like, oh my God, and I'm homesick and I'm, and all that, and you're away for 6 months. It's like quite difficult.
Yeah.
And as a PT and the ship and the captain and the Jimmy and all that were really keen and happy for me to just do what I wanted to do. I was there for happiness.
Yeah.
Whether it's fizz in the morning at 6 o'clock or whether it's weight training classes at 11 or fitness sessions, which you would think that's what the PTI did, eh?
Yeah.
That's your job. Yeah, but what about the amateur dramatics, the quizzes, and all of the other things that you do that just creates people to have a laugh?
Yeah.
Whether it's Uckers, which is like glorified Cluedo, where we'd have a games competition, or because people might not want to do that or might want to do that, and then you set up a rowing club with a little logbook. I can't stand sport, but I'll row. So you row, and you row 100,000, you get a T-shirt. You run around the upper deck, and you get 150 miles, you get a T-shirt. You don't want to be a team sport, and all you're doing is creating these opportunities to engage the ship's company. Not everyone, but the vast majority.
Yeah.
And I was just given a free license to do that for 3.5 years.
Yeah.
Best job of my life. I loved it. Ship's company was amazing. The hierarchy was just fantastic, allowing me to do all of that.
Yeah.
And what I do now, it ain't no different.
Yeah, I was going to say.
It's motivating and supporting communities and towns, bringing people together, finding common values. We've got loads of values that will alienate us, but there'll be something that will connect us. And all we do is we connect those values, and the rest is history.
Yeah, what a great anecdote. I love that. So I want to talk about the meaning of this podcast, The Human Edge, and part of it is to explore with my guests their journeys, because I think we always hear our own stories in other people's stories. That's part of it, but part of it is also to show that we are all so much more similar than we are different as human beings. And I do that by exploring with my guests we all have insecurities and vulnerability. I think that's what makes us essentially human. And we often put people on a pedestal and think, well, they're successful at that because they've got something that I don't, and I don't believe that to be true. So we've talked about your dyslexia and how that has been an insecurity in your life and in your career. I don't want to kind of dwell on that again, but thinking about where you are today and I talk about the human edge. What makes us feel uncomfortable? Where is the edge of our comfort zone? Thinking about your role now as CEO and taking the charity to the next stage of its evolution. So that's the context. So with that in mind, where's your edge as we sit here today?
There are two sides to that. There's two edges to it. The vulnerability. One is I don't want to let people down. And if we were a lot closer to home now, the charity employs 14 people who are incredible. And there's a lady called Julie. She was a TA, and I said to her, "Come and join the charity. Leave your job and your final salary, pension, and all the rest of it, and join this charity that I've set up. You know, take that leap of faith.
Yes.
And she's been amazing, and she's now a trustee, and you know, and that side of it. But there's like all of these people that I just inspire me, who are all part of the journey. And you know, I'm 51, and I won't be here forever. It's a living entity, but it's like I feel not. I don't want to say feel responsible, but I want them to carry on being able to do what they do in their calling.
Yeah.
You know, CHEXS is a great vehicle to allow people that haven't got a degree in child psychology, but have a natural ability to engage and motivate to do what their calling is. Yeah. If that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense.
So there's that element to it, and then
I'm just dwelling on that for a second. So you don't want to let people down. How does that kind of how does that raise its head for you?
Speak to my wife.
I didn't interview this.
You want a podcast die? It's a balance, eh? Yeah. It's a balance.
Yeah. We might need to pause whilst the road sweeper comes past.
No.
The disadvantages of not recording in a soundproof studio.
No, it's been a precarious path.
Yeah.
And I have a really strong board, and Tony, the chair, is an amazing bloke. Yeah. And all of the board are great people, and he has a really good balance. Because sometimes I do need managing, I need controlling, and I need to say, Pete, sit down and chill out. You know, there've been a few times I've had my health's not been great. I got a thing called viral myocarditis 2022, where a virus takes out your heart in Lapland, and I came home from Lapland and I wasn't well. Yeah. I didn't really say much to me to die. Yeah. I was not well at all. Yeah. Anyway, Di convinced me to go to the doctors, and Di just made chicken thighs and baked potato, and I said, I've got an appointment at 4:45, I'll be back at 5:30, and I didn't come home for 10 days. Wow. I went straight to the doctors, went straight there to A&E, and the rest is history, really. And I left hospital 10 days later.
Were you operated on? Or
No, my heart, just drugs and all the rest of it. And I left hospital 10 days later with a 15% heart. 15% leaving hospital after 10 days. Wow. My heart was like one slice of pizza left from saying adios amigo. And you know, and even
that's a wake up call.
Oh good, yeah, totally. But even then in the hospital, I was doing stuff because you just you know, and it's like and sometimes you need leadership and all the rest of it. Sometimes you can't see the wood for the trees. Sometimes you're in the thick of it. You're in the eye of the storm. Yeah. You need a friendly person to say, Pete, stop. Yeah. And I'm making those, and then my wife over lockdown. CHEXS was still doing everything in lockdown. 5 years, eh? Yesterday was in lockdown, and the team were incredible. And it was like, I'm not blowing the whistle. Coming over the trenches with me, guys, because it was dangerous. Yeah. When the schools were back in, we were in. Yeah. We weren't in isolation. We were doing what the schools needed us to do.
Yeah. And just apologies to those listening and watching whilst the road sweeper goes the other way. Yeah.
It's making a nice clear of the road.
Yeah, that's right. We're very grateful, but
and sometimes, and then my wife got diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer, which you can imagine in lockdown in July the 2nd, 2020 was like, wow. But also you had teams that were going out doing food deliveries and working with kids outside in the school, and you needed to make sure your COVID control measures were in place, and they needed support, and they were doing stuff because they were doing it for the good of doing it. And then there was like that element of like, shit, there's all of those people doing all of this and all of the risks. Yeah. And then I've got my wife spewing in a bucket after, and it's just, So on reflection, there's probably in times where I have sailed very close to the wind. And I'm, just for the skin of my teeth, but also having people to talk to, I guess, and all that side of it. And the more you reflect, and it's about, Pete, you just got to stop sometimes. And I think my wife dies, she's amazing. And she's a master's in HR and accountant, and she really helps with advice and guidance. But I think we had a really, not a prickly point, but in September, I thought I had appendicitis, and I hadn't, and I didn't go to the doctors, as you don't, and anyway I had to go because I couldn't walk anymore, and I got admitted, and I had a perforated intestine, and I had peritonitis, and I was in hospital for 10 days because of my own, because I didn't go earlier, because it perforated it, and then
10 days seems to be the magic number with you.
it does, doesn't it? And yeah, that really pissed her off big time. And then I came out of hospital, and then we were doing a sponsored walk for Helping Hearts, who are an amazing charity, and no one was walking it.
And just I wanted to pause on that, because I know a lot of blokes are rubbish about going to the doctor. So it's not just you, but are you because they're like, I'm too scared, I don't want to go, or are you, I've got too much to do. There are other people that need my help. You know, there's a team at CHEXS. There's the kids that we look after. I just can't afford to look after myself.
Don't want to let people down.
Yeah.
So, and also, you don't think it's as bad as it is, eh? I just thought I had irritable bowels, and I'd go to the toilet and everything would be hunky-dory and the pain would all go, and it just didn't go, and from that side of it. But I think we were doing a sponsored walk, and on the Sunday, I came out of hospital on the Friday, and no one was doing the walk, and it was really important that we had to do the walk to show we were committed, and all these people had made this massive effort to do this walk for us, to raise money for us, and unfortunately no one could do the walk, and I couldn't not have someone do that walk, and so I did the walk.
By yourself?
With my lad. And then some other people pitched up, who, you know, it was brilliant. It's like, Dad was like saying, Pete, you've just come out of hospital on Friday, and you're doing a 30-mile walk on Sunday. It was difficult. But, you know, but you do what you do, I guess.
So there are two edges. Maybe we've covered both, but you were saying one is you don't want to let anyone down.
Yeah, and then it sounds very, you know, tongue-in-cheek and very like a movie, but it does amazing work. I'm detached from CHEXS now. I don't see the day-to-day difference that you're doing with a child and seeing the journey that they are on. Or I don't see where a parent's really at rock bottom and are being able to help and give them advice and see them moving forward. So it gives you that impetus to carry on because you can see it's fueling you. I'm out of that mix now. So I'm more business plan, doing this, doing that. And it's like, I'm dyslexic. I write more stuff on all the right. It's like, my God, this is how's this all materialised? And I've got Ben, who's my treasurer, who's top bloke. He's like, Pete, we see you in the forest, we will not be happy. You're not here to be in the forest anymore. You're here to get the chat, you know. And it's right. And it's like, so I don't get the engagement of it. But I know it's making the difference. And my other side is that I don't want not to be able to get what we're doing. And, you know, our last annual report, I think it was over 500 children that have been on the programmes. And I think we'd worked with like between 1-to-1 intense parent support and light touch, which means we help with a Tesco voucher, or we'll help someone buy a washing machine, or we'll do a craft session where parents can spend time with the children. It's nearly like 400 parents and families, plus the 500 children. That's a lot of people. And it's like, they're all getting something from it. And it's like, well, we just don't want that not to be there. So that's the two sides to it.
That's super interesting. That second one. So on the one hand, you're kind of, the charity needs you to take a step back from the kind of the day-to-day work with kids and families, which is something you absolutely love doing. And on the other hand, it requires you to be more of a CEO, maybe more of an administrator in some way, working with numbers and words, which you hate doing. But the charity needs you to do that. And I can see why that's an edge. That's
and the question is, probably someone far better at it than I am, and that's true. And that one person's out there soon to do that role. I think from the sustainability of CHEXS, it's not dependent on one person. Quality control is key. And people that were working with me, the Julies of this world, they were trained by me, and they were brilliant at it. And then they were able to train people. So it's not influenced by me. I don't train the staff. We have processes and we'll do some presentations and behavioural strategies and all that sort of stuff. But there's leads doing that now. So it's not codependent on me at all, which had to happen. Because when you're saying to a school, we're going to work with 10 of your lads, might be a bit fruitful, and we're going to go into the forest and we're going to work with them for 30 weeks. It's quite a big risk. And you need to trust. And incidents happen. And And you've got to have that faith in the team, and it's not codependent on anyone but the entity itself.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's where we're at. And I was very meaningful that I had to step away to make CHEXS sustainable by not being dependent on me. And that meeting in 2018 with the Henry Smith was the wake-up call that this is great, but it means nothing as soon as you've gone, Pete. And that's what everyone else is saying. And you've got to wake up and smell the coffee there. So systematically, I've been putting in the processes and the procedures and everything, and keeping the culture to do what it does.
Yeah, I was about to ask you, are you effectively making yourself redundant? But by the new CEO coming in and somebody looking at it much more operationally, but you're the guardian or you're the custodian of the culture, and so I can see how the charity needs you to be there still to keep that going.
I don't think I am.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the culture's there. I think the board are brilliant. I think the team are great.
Yeah. So are you making yourself redundant?
Yeah, probably am. Yeah. And bring it on.
Yeah.
Because it's the people, might be Marmite people, whatever, have an opinion about me, rightly or wrongly. It's never been about me. It never has. And it's easy for me to say that, but I mean it. I wouldn't have gone through all of the stuff I've gone through.
Yeah.
For the last 15 years of running this charity, if I didn't genuinely believe in it, I didn't have to do it. And that's the difference. My actions speak the volumes of what I really, really mean. And yes, there are people out there that would be far better at than me, and rightly so. And Liz is coming in as the Chief Operating Officer, coming in with new ideas and bring the teams are great now. They're brilliant people. And it'll just give a different perspective, and it'll evolve the programme. The things that we do, we might not be doing. As long as there's a meaning and purpose, we're building resilience, we're giving aspirations, and we're putting it, there's clear expectations. It's raining, but we're still doing it, And if I've got a parent craft session, and we've got 10 parents down, and we're meant to work with 20 children, and we've only got one parent and 2 children, it's happening. We're not going to cancel it. We're still doing it. Yeah. And that's the culture of CHEXS, and that's there. Yeah. Now, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense.
From that side of it.
What a great note to end on. Thanks so much for coming in. I've had an absolute blast, and I have to say, what you do, how you are, is so inspirational. And I really hope for the audience out there, they find the same thing. It's been a real pleasure having you here. Thank you.
Thanks for having us, and it's talking. I don't know what I've said, actually, to be fair. Just speak from the heart, really. But thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah.